We are up. The broadcast is live. Awesome. Well, welcome everyone, and thank you so very much for joining us today. I can't tell you how excited I am for this day. I've been looking at my calendar every day. Is it here yet? Is it here yet? This is a fabulous day to celebrate women and celebrate women in esports and celebrate women in the whole esports ecosystem, which is much broader than just the competitive gaming aspect. And today we have an illustrious panel for you. I am so thrilled that these women are able to share their expertise, their knowledge, and their drive and their journey with you today. So I am going to be quiet and I am going to give the floor to Dr. T.L. Taylor from MIT.
Hi, it's great to be here. Thanks, April, for hosting this, convening this, and I'm just really honored to be in this panel with some fabulous women. So I'm T.L. Taylor. I'm a professor at MIT. I'm a sociologist and do work on gaming spaces, a variety of gaming spaces. I came to esports a while ago, back before it was a little bit mainstream. I started my esports research back in 2003, pretty much because I had heard that there were people playing games professionally, and it really intrigued me. I went to my first event and met a guy in a suit who was there scouting new talent, and I thought, holy cow, there's a lot more to this than I realized. So I ended up studying that very early 2000s scene of esports, wrote a book about esports, and then, as with a lot of my projects, happened to be sitting at home one night and came across Twitch. This was in maybe 2012, and thought, oh wait, this seems like the next important story to tell. So did a project on that. You can get a free copy of that book at watchmeplay.cc. There's a Creative Commons copy there. And part of that journey was back a number of years ago now, maybe 5 years ago, ended up co-founding an organization with Dr. Morgan Romine. And it's now director of research is Johanna Brewer, called Anykey.org. And we focus on diversity and inclusion in gaming. Very honored to have Kishona on our board of advisors now. I'm the chair of the advisory board now, but so we've been trying to really actively take research-based findings. All of us, Johanna, myself, and Morgan, have our PhDs, but we've tried to take research-based findings and actually make change in both the esports, but the gaming and live streaming space. And so we continue to work on that. A lot of resources, so you can go to anykey.org and find out more about that. So that's kind of my windy trajectory through esports.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. And I think it's important to note that you were ahead of the curve at every step of this game and laid the groundwork for a lot of us who are doing our research now. There's not a dissertation in this space that doesn't have your name on it. So many, many thanks. I can't thank you enough for your groundbreaking work.
Thank you so much, April. Thanks.
With that, I will toss it over to Dr. Gray.
Thank you so much, April. So glad to share space with you all and to be here. I just listening to TL talk, and I'm just thinking about how, like you just said, April, so many of us are here, because we were introduced to TL's work, and how TL, has centered, women and girls in her work, and make sure that those spaces are equitable, and actually translated that research into infrastructure, creating, like organizations, just like Verta, creating like the infrastructures and the structures to ensure that play is equitable and fair and inclusive. So I'm honored to be in this space with you all. I really am. So who am I? I'm Kishona Gray. I am currently an associate professor in writing, rhetoric, and digital studies at the University of Kentucky. And I recently wrote Intersectional Tech, the experiences of Black users in online spaces. I have just been, when I came into these spaces, doing ethnography, some of the stuff that I learned from TL, I was like, ooh, I like doing that. I want to do that in some of these spaces over here, So, I look at like console spaces mostly, and I look at the spaces that, women of color occupy, Black folks occupy, and other marginalized minoritized folks in these spaces, and to really pay attention to like some of the groundbreaking and innovative things that they were doing. One of the things that I love seeing is how so many of like the safety tips and precautions that a lot of these platforms are taking are because Black and brown women said, hey, we have to protect our own selves because the platforms are not doing that. So I hope that the books, I try not to really focus like on the doom and gloom. We know racism's happening, sexism's happening. There's also some dope, just creations and dope innovations that are happening in this space as well. And so I want to elevate those and highlight those like in a lot of my work. So, what am I doing like right now? Some of the things that I'm focused on is continuing a lot of that work, but I'm also focusing a lot like on the intergenerational kind of play right now, seeing how we can get like more of our elders and more caregivers and older folks like inside these spaces, especially the non-traditional ones, like not folks who are already there and who've been gaming, but I'm talking about like the folks who say gaming is a waste of time. I've been spending a lot of time like connecting like with those folks, and so that they can see that, especially what our kids are doing, it's not a waste, that is actually, it has some, pathways that could be useful and beneficial to them, either as a career path or not, just like developing skill sets, developing like leadership potential. There are so many things that's possible like inside these spaces. So I want to make sure that our kids are taking advantage of that as well. So that's who I am. So glad to be here. Thank you.
Oh, fantastic, Dr. Rain. Thank you so much for joining us. And I want to point out that your voice is, again, this panel is amazing. It's like a dream panel for me. Your voice is the strongest voice out there for diversity and inclusion in gaming and esports, and the papers you're writing and the talks you give. Again, many, many thanks for being here. And with that, I toss the floor to Verda. Thank you so much. You're speaking on our entrepreneurial front.
Yes. You all make me want to go get a PhD, and that's something I didn't want after my master's degree. So I'm gonna say it. Like, this is amazing. I love being in spaces where there are very specifically other women, and then also other Black women that kind of inspire me to say, wait, maybe I would consider that. Maybe I won't be the only one in the room now, as we do that. And so I'm Verda, pronouns are she, her, and I am one of the co-founders of the Game Hers. And I feel like a true West Indian child had like 11 teen jobs to get to this place in the esports ecosystem. So by training, I was an educator, I was a classroom teacher, I was a school principal, I then trained principals, I've worked in education throughout all across the US. And in the past 10 years have really been focused around anti-racism and anti-oppression, and how we can, in essence, utilize our own stories and lived experiences to become more practiced at these conversations. I believe that just as a nation, we're not practiced, and that's part of the journey. And so coming into the space, into the esports ecosystem and the gaming industry, if you had asked me 3 years ago if I would be here, I'd be like, what are you talking about? What are you talking about? Like, didn't even see kind of that possibility of bringing kind of all of these passions to bear. And I feel like I find myself at the intersection of a lot of things that I love. Building community, amplifying, giving voice, as well as money to women and other groups that are historically marginalized, and really creating anti-oppressive spaces. I use that terminology more so than safe because that's so subjective, but creating anti-oppressive spaces that we can like coexist in. And so my motto in life, I tell people all the time, I'm all love with appropriate doses of rage, because like I just love people. I love being around people, but there are things that just really piss me off. And I try to channel that into like productive things. And I feel like the Gamers is one of the ways that I'm trying to channel that within this space into like a productive and powerful space. So we got a lot to talk about. I'm so excited to be here. Yeah. My cup is like already filled and we haven't even gotten to like the rest of the questions. So I'm kind of like, I'm really just processing that right now.
That is fantastic. Thank you so much. And again, our example. That's what I'm hoping. Words don't teach, you lead by example. And all of you here are leading by example. So thank you so much for joining us. And for those who don't know me, I'm April Welch from the Illinois Institute of Technology. I'm the Associate Vice President for Strategic Initiatives. And my job is to bring new things to life at IIT. So esports has been my baby since 2010, and I'm really excited to be here. And it's about my panel today, so that's all I'm saying about myself. So the first question, The first question, and we can go in the same order that we introduced ourselves in to save time. So from your perspective, and given your experience, what needs to happen to increase the number of women in esports?
Yeah, this is such an important question, and I'm one of those awful academics, like a complicated one. So, um, but I will say for myself, one of the things I often think about are what are the lessons we can learn from traditional sports and how profoundly women and girls' participation in traditional sports has changed over the years. I mean, I'm old enough that actually when I was born, there were not a lot of women and girls participating in traditional sports, and we had really powerful structural changes that helped amplify that. So that's one thing I often think about is what are the structural changes that need to be put in place? In the US, that was Title IX, which said you actually have to address equity. You have to be thinking about getting women on the field. So I think paying attention to structures of participation is really key. But I also think this is where, if I was to launch a program right now that could only have one focus, I think thinking about girls' experience is really key, because it's one thing to kind of try to give adult women the possibilities for now becoming competitive, but we know women's sports have changed so profoundly because young girls on the field, right? They got on the field. So I think thinking about giving young women, girls, opportunities for exploration, trying out different things. And I really love two things Kishona and Verta said. The social innovations that players do. So watching how are people creating better spaces on the ground and taking that up. And I love that language of anti-oppression, really thinking very critically about what are the anti-oppressive structures, policies, attitudes, cultural practices we have to start inculcating, getting rid of harassment and gatekeeping. The other thing I will say is I do think we need a lot more thought and attention to the kind of cultural attitudes around women as competitors. I think this is still a place we have not really developed good muscles around. The idea that women can be focused, singularly focused on things and competitive and enjoy competition. I think that's one of those things too, where I think thinking about what that looks like across race, are white women afforded that opportunity differentially than women of color or girls of color? So I think thinking about structure, thinking about culture, and thinking about policy, all of these things, there's no single fix. And it's definitely not finding the perfect game. To me, but I'm a sociologist. It's about all of that stuff that our games sit in that we've got to tackle. So just to tee up a few ideas.
Fantastic. Fantastic.
I'll go next. I think I was next up.
Mm-hmm.
I always struggle with this one, right? Because on the one hand, I think it's like that we get stuck in like that DEI conundrum, right? We got to increase the bodies. How do we increase the numbers, right? Make sure that we get as many of us in there as possible. And then I always think about, I remember having like conversations, probably years ago. I think it was my time probably there at my TTL, whenever we were talking about like, but what are those structures? What do they look like? When folks get in there, then what are their experiences? Which is why, Verta's work is, so important and so significant, because, folks like her are actively trying to like improve the conditions, improve the climate. Because I'm thinking about, the time when we grew up, like whenever you were thinking about, okay, just get girls in STEM, get girls in computer science. And then boys didn't want us there. They were actively, sabotaging us, right? Like, stealing our ideas. We weren't valued, we weren't welcome, we weren't wanted. And then, I thought that there was like a significant time where there was like, kind of like girls only spaces, girls only clubs. Those are very, very significant and important, right? I'm an advocate, like for those. But then I think, for me, I'm like, we still aren't doing anything about the problem, right? And so that's why I tried. There was a point in my career where I spent significant time in those really toxic spaces, really antisocial kinds of spaces that tried to figure out, what's the anatomy here? What's the architecture that enables this? What's happening here? And I spent like a little time, thinking about like particular like white masculine anxieties, like, and thinking about this language of like, oh, women are like space invaders, or like, we need our own thing in our own spaces. And so I spent like a lot of time on in campus, on campuses, looking at like their gaming spaces. So a lot of those smash spaces, the esports spaces on campus, they weren't welcoming like to women. And then I found a lot of it was just like, there were so many assumptions that like boys didn't know. They weren't trained to know. They weren't at the latest movie. What's that latest movie? The Disney movie, Turning Red. Is that what that
Yes,
one's
I
called?
think so. I don't know what it's called. I haven't seen it yet, but yes, that was the think pieces on that. I know where you're going.
Yes. It made me realize, Verda, I'm like, there are so many conversations. We equip girls and women with so many things, so many tools, so much language, right? To withstand all the things that are happening to us in those spaces. But the flip side, what's the conversation happening there, right? What are we equipping like these boys with? And so that's why I spent a lot of time there. I also I got into this whenever I was on my campus, and I realized that the languaging around rape culture was only targeting girls. It was women, excuse me. It's targeting women on campus, like, what you need to do at parties, how you need to keep yourself safe. And I'm like, well, where's the language? Where do we tell boys just to not rape, don't assault, get consent? It was non-existent. So that's where, I started spending like a lot of time, like in some of those, some of those other spaces, to make sure that the language is like matching, to ensure that whenever there is a convergence of us in these spaces, that the language is the same, the conversations are the same. And I think Turning Red, that show really illustrated just like the differences between us and the conversations that are happening. And we got to do a lot more work around that. Yeah.
And it definitely ties into what I was going to say, which is about shifting the burden. So this question is, what you're just naming is that, right? Like the burden, I think the psychic burden as well as the work burden, right? And the psychic one is one that we don't talk about enough, which is that, as women going into spaces, and thank you for going into those spaces, because that's a lot to take on, right? There's your psychological stuff that you then have to get past to even actually engage with a game freely, or as freely as your counterparts who don't also have to do that psychic work. And I mean that, and that's a heavy thing. So I do think that for me, in answering the question, when I thought about it, it's two things. It's it needs to be seen as an everyone issue and not just a women and girls issue. And that will shift that thinking, right? That's a shift in your brain to say, actually, this is everyone's issue. This is not just the issue of women and girls. And that's one of the big things, a shift that has to happen. And in so doing, you have to then center. You have to center us, you have to listen to us, and you have to believe us. Not because it's because you don't want to get canceled, or you don't want, all to be dragged or whatever, but because it is the right thing to do. And because it will then create the next generation of young people who do know that this is all of ours to address and to deal, and to handle. And then the second, from the perspective of, like an entrepreneur, someone who started a company, is like, really put your money where your mouth is. You have to, and we have to start. And this is not even just about paying parity, like equal pay. This is about just like pay us, pay women, pay us when you wouldn't necessarily pay a man. And not because you want to prove a point. There's two reasons for this. One is that what we are bringing to the table, you would not have without us. And there's value to that. So number one, you need to pay for that. And number two, we are already starting behind the 8 ball. So when we go, we go to funders, we are a for-profit and for-purpose company. But if everyone doesn't believe that we're a nonprofit because we're talking about elevating and amplifying women, I don't know what's going on there. And I'm not even saying that nonprofits are not amazing doing this. So many have paved the way for the Gamehers to be here. That said, we've just really thought about moving the needle also means putting money into the hands of women in this industry. And it's across the board, right? It's who's owning teams, who are the shoutcasters, who are in your legal departments, who are, who are these people? Because there's so many opportunities. And then we can talk about who the actual players are as well. There's so many other ways to do that. So those are some of the things that I would say. I'm trying to just be additive, because like I co-sign everything that was just said.
Fantastic. Oh, go ahead.
Can I just, I really think this point about shifting where the responsibility for the issue lay is so critical, because I think it is so true that so much of it has been like, how can we get people to kind of twist and turn themselves to fit in this other space? And I have to admit, one of the terms I've come to really loathe is resiliency, because it usually is about like, can you fit yourself in that space? And like, if the space has to be willing to accommodate and change and grow and develop in relation to this broader vision of what it can be. I mean, I'm maybe like others. I'm a weird mix of like there's a lot of bad stuff, and then there are these moments where we can see levers and footholds to change it. But I think it has to be really shifting the weight of the burden in important ways. So I appreciate Berta, you framing that too, especially.
Thank you so much. I think absolutely everything, again, co-signing too. And I think part of our job is to really impact and influence the publishers and those who are putting these tournaments together, and those who are paying out these big purses, and those who are ignoring the fighting game community where there are a lot of women. And those that are, I know it's not about a given game, but it is in many aspects about the structure of the given games and how those games are presented to our community. And when we change those that structural aspect, we'll be able to naturally and organically see more women participating. So on to our next question. I don't want to run out of time. And if we can tackle them in the same order, that'd be fantastic. So again, trying to always stay on the side of what do we pull for, not what do we push against. My question is, what would you say to parents to help them make informed decisions about allowing their girls to play in the first place?
I'm not a parent, so I want to defer to anyone who is first. And I mean, I have thoughts, but I kind of want to defer to those with on the ground expertise.
Okay, I have kiddos, so they're not little though. So, but I have 19. Actually, will be 20 this week, and then I have a 15-year-old. And the things when I saw this question, and it kind of is also like my background in like teaching, particularly in the K to 12 setting, because that's where I taught. I think that I said you need to be present, be authentic, be informed, and also just be. I think sometimes. So the being present is just be around it. You don't have to, and this goes with the be authentic, you don't have to pretend to like gaming. You just have to lean into the fact that you love your child and you know that they have passions. And so be present and just be your authentic self. And doing that means you can get to be the parent and say that there are ground rules. Like my son could not play any fighting games for a long time. And he would be with his cousins. He would be so mad. And I'm like, no, we're not doing that. It's not rated E for everybody. And I'm not down with that. Right. So he could not play it. But I had that, and it was just a policy, and you can still do that. But I was always just trying to be present. I would play with him, even though I was terrible when he was younger, because for him, it was one way for me to enter the conversation. It was a way for us to actually have some of those hard conversations. And for me to hear some of this chat that's going on, I'm like, what is happening up in here? And then not for me to interject there, but for me then to have conversations with him about it. So I want to name that it's both and, right? The toxic things are not, I think there are strides being made, or a light is being shined. I don't even know if that's the right grammar. However, it's still happening. So if you're present, you could do that. And then I think also just be. There are moments where we don't, as adults and parents, like we feel like this really big responsibility, as we should, right? For these humans that we have come through us into the world. That said, they are their own entities, and their entire generation is going to figure out something that we have never seen or experienced before. And so you need to just be, and you got to accept that. And I think that those are the things that I would say to parents. I don't know if those are kind of like maybe a little bit more like esoteric and philosophical, but I think that they actually really, really align with esports as well. So that's what I would say.
Thank you so much.
That's fantastic. I love everything that you said there, and it got me thinking about a few years ago. I used to run camps when I was at Eastern Kentucky University, and early on those camps advertise, hey, we got these camps around gaming. Of course, it was always boys. It was always white boys that would come, right? We had a great time. I want to serve, especially being in Eastern Kentucky. There were a lot of populations that I wanted to serve. We have like, poor white communities. We got some urban black communities like in Louisville and Lexington. We got migrant farm workers community. So a lot of that community looks, Latinx and Hispanic. So I wanted to serve like as many populations as I could. I didn't know how to reach those folks, but I remember being intentional. I reached out to churches, so I was like, let me not trust the schools to do the things that I need them to do. And let me go to the churches, right, to go talk to some folks. And it was there that I had conversations with parents. And, earlier when I was saying that, so many parents thought that it was like a waste of time. They didn't understand like the utility of gaming. And I realized I needed to like position like myself differently to make sure that I connected, which is why I started like a lot of the projects around the intergenerational gaming, and I wanted to just have like a pathway because so many parents, if they have questions about games, like for instance, the rating system, so many parents rating system, right? They don't understand, what's happening in these spaces. And gaming has grown just in this last decade alone. So, and if they, come from like a Nintendo and a Sega mindset, they're like, what is this? What is streaming? What is that? And there's nowhere where for them to ask those questions, right? If we were to say, hey, if parents had questions about like the rating of that latest game, where do they go? And then can they trust the information that's even out there? Or are they going to be like overwhelmed? So I just wanted, especially using my institutional, power and the infrastructure that I had, I wanted to be that pathway and that platform that connected directly like to parents and caregivers and like folks that had questions. Because I really for me, I didn't want black and brown kids not being able to participate and take part. And that parents knew that their girls were safe in those spaces as well. And like if they didn't think there was space, like how can they equip their girls like to make sure that they are, pay attention to different kinds of languaging, like especially when you're going to online play. So I think really just information sharing is really like the biggest thing that I think that can ease like the concerns that a lot of parents and caregivers like have. And we don't have enough of that. We don't have enough information pathways of getting information directly to parents, I feel like.
Thank you.
I would only. It's great. So the non-parent answer I can give to. I love both those answers. I think the other thing is, I think one of the things girls are not often afforded is the space of exploration that sometimes boys get in their social networks. And I think, taste in movies, in television, in music, and in games is something that we all discover, right? We don't play all games. We often have genre preferences. And I think letting girls explore and understand that there's a range of things and that you may not like this title or this genre, but you may really, this other one may be your space. I think that's really critical. And recognizing that girls still are sometimes at a disadvantage in having the opportunity to explore. So what does that look like as a parent to facilitate?
Fantastic. And I'll ask Lindsay if you could there's an organization called COPE, COPE. If you could put the link for that in the chat for me, Lindsay. I can't add to the chat right now, but I would love to share that link with our audience. And one of the things I found, I too have no children, but I say I have 7,000 kids because at Illinois Tech, I consider our students my kids. So one of the things I found was for gamers growing up now, more and more girls are winning the fight for the PlayStation at home. But if parents would buy two of them, if you can afford it, buy your girls their own system when they're little, so they don't have to have that battle with their brother and they have that space to explore. All right, given that, let me move on to our next question. And thank you for the questions in the chat. We're gonna get to those at the end. So are there specific programs or initiatives that you are working on to help girls and women become part of a supportive gaming community?
Kishona, you should go first this time, Kishona.
I wanted to hear more about gamers and any kid, like, 'cause I think that's, especially since they're so visible and outward facing and connect like directly, because a lot of my stuff is very internal, it's very like exclusive, folks that come to it are just invited, so it's not like I don't really have that much like public facing kind of stuff, but the research that comes from it is very public facing. I think that can be very telling. I I think that what I what I like to do is always, make connections with like local communities that I'm a part of. Really, mainly just to share like resources with folks, but also just to do the things that I was saying earlier about making sure that people are connected to information and to know how to help folks like get involved and get engaged. I also think that it's important that, especially like a lot of the I remember having a conversation with a young woman, and that she said that basically the thing that is there's like this visual signifier that if people are connected to like Twitch and a lot of these like corporate entities, that signifies that they have like made it in the space. I think it's also important that we make sure that people know that there are different pathways and different ways of engaging. Because one of the things that I think is like has been like the most sad is that a lot of young folks are contorting themselves to fit like within these narrow definitions of what it means to be a streamer in particular. I'm talking about streaming culture. So there were some young women. I remember having some questions of they asked, did they have to like dress sexy like to be like popular? That question broke my heart. For them to ask that. But whenever they would go online, they would see these beautiful women. I'm not going to take anything away from like the women, especially that maybe like wear revealing clothing. And I was like, because that's just it's one pathway, or it's one way to be and exist in the space. But I want to make sure that these platforms are also doing things that show like a wide variety and different ways of like of expressing yourself. Expressing yourself, verbally, physically, aesthetically. Because I think what if we were to rely on a lot of those like platforms, we would think that there's very just singular ways of like engaging. So I think a lot of these platforms, I feel like the platforms and the companies, I think that they have like a duty, to make sure that they are connecting folks to like, different entities. One of the things I was very disappointed by. I'm not sure if folks who are like during Black History Month, like in particular, Twitch like espoused all these beautiful DEI kind of statements, and it was hard to get visibility. So I had some young folks saying, "Hey, we're looking for like the Black streamers," and Twitch said that they were going to be like elevating these folks, and it was hard to find them like on and a lot of the mobile devices, right? And I think that there are, I think that that's like a problem too. Like if you don't see yourselves in these spaces, then you think that it's something not for you. So I think we really have to mobilize, use our resources to make these connections with like industry spaces to make sure that they realize that the algorithms may be doing like a lot of work, but they can also counter a lot of that. So a lot of this is not even on the women and girls to have to do anything about it. A lot of it's on the infrastructure, the institutions to have to do some things differently to make sure that they know that they can be a part too.
Fantastic.
Something that I would add, I don't know if I'm going to answer the question directly. I can answer the things what you were just talking about. Shauna makes me think a lot about community. I think there was a time where people thought that content was the royalty. And I think TL, you even said this, it's not even about the game names, right? Like actually community is the thing that reigns supreme. And just this evolution of thinking about, and when you talked, it was like being a community organizer and like actually putting more emphasis on what it means to cultivate, mine and respond kind of in real time with your community. And that's a lot of what we are trying to do as a company, is create things because we're having conversations with just realizing like women is not monolithic, right? So just because someone presents as a woman and you slap them up there on your board of trustees or whatever, that's not a box to check off, right? Like literally, like, what are you talking about? We're half the earth, and then multiply that by the permutations of who we are and how we exist, right? So we thought so much about, I think at first it was kind of like, well, is it all the social media? Is it Discord? And it's actually understanding that there are, within our own company, lots of different communities are emerging. Right. So that we do have a community of people that love competitive gaming and want us to do more tournaments. And when we kind of like co-sign with a tournament, they feel that it is a place that they know will be regulated in a way that allows them to play more freely. Right. We have a whole set of streamers. We have a whole community that's around streaming. Right. And and we see like kind of where they show up. Anime is showing up. We created our own app for this very reason, because Discord was challenging. Like it was just hard for some of us to kind of like, it's another like, just the way it was set up kind of didn't feel right. So we created a community where, and also felt like our Discord's amazing, but others felt real judgy. Like I had to be really on my P's and Q's about don't post that meme, don't post a picture of Murphy who's being super quiet right now, but sometimes it's like rah, 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 barking all the time, because that's not what we're about here or whatever, right? So just kind of allowing communities to emerge, and it doesn't have to be one set thing. I think that sometimes people get very, very caught up in the thing and not the group of people that have come together to do that thing together, right? Whatever it is, and it could be a game title, it could be different things in this instance. And so I think those are some like really important things that we are grappling with as a company. And then what does that mean for the impact that a company that centers women and femme-identifying folks can have in the larger world, right? And that's why this conversation is like so key and cool to me, that, academics and ethnographers and like doing the research, right? Because that matters. And it's stuff we didn't have before, right? I think about even just the development of brain research from the time that I started teaching in the classroom. We didn't have a lot of that. And I was a middle school teacher, and now I understand completely. I'm like, woo, see, I love that. I love that age group, but it's because literally things are happening in their brains. That's how they're showing up as a different person every day. And I love it and I embrace it, right? But it also means why they're so into justice, right? And why it's like at that age. So I just think we have a lot of ways that we can like cross-pollinate. So I just really think community is a really key thing here, and we have to start leaning on organizations and some publishers actually, and some games that have done this really well, that have cultivated really, really strong community and have really, really great community managers. So that's the thing I'll say.
I saw I think the pledge link flew by for any key. It's a way to just kind of publicly show you're wanting to be a good community member and showing up when you get a little badge in the Twitch channel. But I will say, actually, as the pledge is great and lots of people have signed it, but one of the things I'm most excited by and proud of with any key is the way we really just try to like amplify and support the existing work that's being done out there. I think both Morgan and I, when we co-founded AnyKey, we were like, we don't want to recreate the wheel. There's lots of amazing work being done, and people and communities, and how can we support and amplify them? And so, like, if you go to the AnyKey website, there's an affiliates page that links to lots of other streamers and communities that you can plug into. There's white papers there that, in terms of helping you find ways to build your own community. Like, I will say, and maybe this taps into one of the questions I've seen fly by from audience member, bad actors take up a lot of the oxygen in the room. And I think one of the things I'm really interested and committed to is like, there's lots of people who want it to be better. There's even some men who want to be good allies and they don't know what to do. And can we give them tools? And so one of the things we've tried to do at AnyKey is just like, here are some white papers. Here are some best practices. You want to run a gender and trans inclusive tournament? Here's some best practices. So I think for me, that's the kind of stuff that gets me, like, how can we really help communities often continue the work they're doing, but they just need a few more footholds. So yeah.
We got to shout out Cash real quick. Can we shout out Cash? And we want to let Cash know we see the questions. Thank you. And I kind of want to go into, because TL, you mentioned allies, and we had Rafi, who they're one of the co-founders. GAYMERS. The Y in gamers means that you belong. And speaking to them a lot about this, one of the things that Rafi said was that, ally is a verb. And so if we can like shift the way we think of that, right, that how can I ally with, or what are the actions, because there's not an end destination. It is a moving thing. And a lot of the things that Cash has been talking about doing with his sons and things like that prove that to be true. It's active. There is no end. It is constant work. And that the ways that, you know, there was the question about women not like wanting women to come, but then they're not feeling, but they're not coming, and they don't, you know, they don't like kind of trust, because it's true. They don't. We need to see like what it is that's happening. We need to, one of the things that was like really eye-opening to me was I worked with Russ Hamer and this group just Esports, JUST, I get, you know, just as in just and justice, all of the things. And one of the things that came up in one of the recommendations was like, where is your you know, actually, where is your gaming room located on campus? Where are you doing your events, even if you were to like do it in a city somewhere? Because as women, we are not going to the corners of the campus. I don't care if that's where you have the best setup or whatever. We're not going to a remote place to do anything, let alone enter a space where we might be the only one. And so how are you thinking about that, right? Which bar or which gaming place did you pick to go to the like the after hours thing? It's literally women and girls seeing you actively doing the thing will then start to bring us to the yard. I think the other piece that we found was one thing that we started a collegiate program, because even just having our name recognition there really helped. So one of the colleges, like that, you know, there was a group of girls that wanted us to come to their campus. We give them like a code of conduct. We do all these things with them. And within just one semester, the amount of other girls who maybe don't want to be competitive but actually play video games that came up increased by something like 30% for them. And so we are then also like, it's putting yourself also next to and collaborating with, just like TL said, this is not about reinventing the wheel. If you go and have that any key and have their pledge, and like people will start to know, oh, you actually care about this. You signed a pledge that said that you want to make it so. And we will have grace with you as you figure it out. But if we don't even see that, it's hard to want to be in that space, right? So yeah, I wanted to say that.
Absolutely. Thank you. I wanted to pivot to Kasha's question too, so thank you for that. One of the things that we do too, it's so important to put those signs up. We put the pledges that are on the NET website up right on outside our esports center, which is located in the center of our campus for that very reason, where there is public safety and 24-hour access. One of the things that we really want to tell our allies, our men, is teach your sons to speak up. So when they're in these chat groups and they're seeing somebody getting barraged or somebody getting, you know, just rolled over, teach them to speak up. There are many times now. I always focus on the good. You know, one of the things that happens that helps is people know they're not alone when they see that chat blow up with people who fight against racism and people who say that's not who I am, or people who have the badge, the Aniki badge that is always. I'm one of those people. I have the Aniki badge up. So when they see that, they know this is some vocal person who's not going to sit quietly as I jump on or bully this person. So please teach them to speak up.
And as a mom, I would say role play that, because I think that some people think that by just saying it is like it does it. That's just the first step. And you literally should role play with them. And you should say like, okay, so if somebody says this, what are you going to say? Because a lot of times as parents, we stop at the like, well, I told him such and such, but they need to like, you really should practice and say, okay, so if you're playing a game and somebody says this, or ask them, what are the things that you've heard that have made you feel really uncomfortable when you're gaming? And then say, okay, so I'm going to help you figure out how you can be supportive or an ally, or what you can do in those moments. So I just want to add that role playing is really important, particularly with younger, I think all ages, quite frankly, but with younger people especially.
Yeah, I want to plus one this, because it's true, like policy, codes of conduct, they're necessary but not sufficient. They are only a first step. You have to have enforcement. You have to be willing to have hard conversations. You have to be willing to socialize people. I mean, again, I think this thing, again, like a lot of college clubs I visited, they wanted things to be better. And, I think putting some structures in place, but they also then have to do the work of norms and socialization. And that can be hard. And part of that is teaching people how to do that work. So yeah, and I was so sorry Kashona had to run up, but I know this is something that she does a lot of, work around. She's got these amazing labs that she runs on campuses. And so, yeah, I'm sorry she had to run off. But she's speaking at GDC now. So she's spreading good info other places now.
That's right. Thank you so much. And to Kishona for the recording, we really appreciate you. And we're going to put your LinkedIn in the chat so that anyone who wants to reach out to you can. So our one of the questions that I really wanted to hear from you on is, what do you believe the future will look like for women, and what can we do to move the needle on increasing the number of women and increasing the inclusivity and the role of women at the highest level, at all levels?
Maybe I can just amplify something that we briefly mentioned earlier. I think it was Kashona who brought it up. You know, there's often these pushes like, let's get more women into STEM. Or I remember when game design programs started coming to the university, let's get more women into the industry. And I will tell you, like, I'm pretty ambivalent about that mission if those spaces don't change. Like, I'm not interested in grinding up students or women to go work in industries or spaces that are actually not meant for them, and are not even interested in doing the work. And that's not just women, it's people of color, it's LGBTQ folks. So I actually think the first mission, or at least a mission that's a kindred and in tandem, is we have to have real structural change, from everything like we're just talking about to what are we paying people, like actually acknowledging labor, acknowledging hidden labor, acknowledging labor that doesn't look like what we usually think of labor, but is absolutely labor. Everything from that to really fundamental structures of like, how many women are on your staff? Like who's on your board of directors? Like, so before I want to get more people in, but I don't want to throw them into situations that are just going to grind them up, grind them down. So for me, it's that tandem thing.
I agree with that. And I think that what would the future look like? When I thought on that question, it's really going to look pretty much like every other industry where women have done what we do. And the question is then hard to answer because the imagination of what we can imagine it's endless. And I think that when people ask me questions around like, well, what would it look like to DEIB has happened, it means that panels would literally look diverse, that we would actually have a group of men or people that are from different, genders that are not in the binary, that would be on a panel talking about how we've created these wonderful spaces that are inclusive and reduce harm for everyone. Or the complete opposite. We would go to panels that are literally just about how to, cryptocurrency or, gamification or whatever. And it's also diverse. You can literally see, like, if you go to something like a PAX or any of these conventions, you can literally see the lack of the future that we claim to want in how the panels are structured. You see, panels that, I can't even say more about that. I think the other thing about what the future holds for this, it's there's some things about it that are sad to me, right? So having already gone through college, done a master's degree, like when I talked to, in December, did a bunch of focus groups with collegiate folks. And so there was, I think it was Mel had said, include women in the planning. This is about, you're not doing something for us, you're doing something with us. This is not, and so if that's the truth, right, this is not about doing something for women. This is about doing it with women to ensure that we are there, means that women need to be a part of the initial conversation, not an afterthought, because now you've realized that something is a certain way. And what that means is sacrificing and actually changing course for those organizations that have already started down a path that doesn't include us. But I think what we will see is a bunch of brilliant, and we're already seeing it, indie game studios coming up. We're seeing all of these amazing organizations being created that are seeking to create this. And I think that the space is expansive. We need all of it. We want all of it. And I think we're going to start to see more of these smaller entities that are creating that are networked together, that then overshadow the ones that are causing a stronghold where they don't want to see themselves. They refuse to see change happen for them. They'll get swallowed up.
Can I just one more beat on that? Because I think it is actually, I kind of want to make visible how long women have been involved behind the scenes in esports. So when you think about planning in esports, they've been there since the beginning. And in fact, at all tiers, they're often this invisible labor. So I actually think even more than having them at the table for planning, it's that the vision of what we're going to do can be changed by the people at the table. So it's not just bringing women in to execute the vision of esports that it's always been. Honestly, I believe we are nearly, the vision of esports as it has always been has nearly run its course in terms of audience, in terms of, we have got to think more expansively. There's gaming is a mainstream leisure activity. All kinds of folks like to participate and spectate and fandom. If we're actually really going to grow esports, it means changing the vision. So not just bringing them to the table to execute what was already planned, but being open to radically rethinking what that thing could be. So kind of plus wanting to divert to.
And I'm a plus one it again, because I really feel like it's a willingness to be led by women, right? And a willingness to what you see as sacrifice is not a sacrifice. So if it means that there are less positions that are quote unquote filled by men on these levels, it doesn't mean that there are not other spaces for that work of a man to be done. And I think that's also a shift. Plus like 17,000 on what you just said, TL.
That is fantastic. You guys are amazing. I would just add, we're going to build our own tables. You know, we're not looking for a seat at your old table. We're going to build our own tables. We're going to recreate what gaming is. We're going to have some measure other than only kills as what you're counting as value. As we grow these young game designers who are women, I think it naturally we're going to come into ourselves. So I'm super excited about the future. The fourth industrial revolution is here. Our job as educators is to teach them how to use these tools to tell their story, to get their vision of what gaming and games can be out there. So I am thrilled about where we are and where we're going on that front.
That's the big mic drop, April. April, can I just say too, I love what you just said. I really think it's incumbent on those of us who are in schools and universities to stop and not recreate esports as is. One of the beauties of living in the institutions we do is we should be able to think more expansively. And I love that we should be the ones who are helping create the space for something different as well. We should not be reproducing the industry as is. So I love that you framed our role in that as well.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. We don't want to be victims here. We've got all the tools. We've got the same resources now. We've got new companies looking for us. So I'm really excited about our ability to tell folks to do just what Verda did and go start your company.
Yeah. And also, like, the thing is that it's not easy, right? Because I do exist within the macrocosm that is this, this system. And so everything that we're saying is also having other people that are willing to be that creative. And those are of all genders, right? Because I think that it goes back to kind of the burden being there, because sometimes it is hard to always be the one having to literally construct a new existence. And we want people to not just be bystanders or just watching that, right? And I think that that's something that it does excite me. And there's an opportunity for everyone to engage in this. And that I think is what's really exciting.
Oh, that's fantastic. So we've got 7 minutes left. So I want to give you guys an opportunity to give us some final thoughts. One of the questions in the chat was, what should I do? I'm trying to create a safe space. What, logistically, what should I do in so many words? So the final question, we've got, what do you believe the future will look like? We got some great answers there, but let's see if we can give them some practical advice on what do I do right now from where I'm at?
Well, I think if you haven't done things like signing the pledge, really just doing a little research on who's out there, like any key, there's the game I think all of the things that Shauna's working on, you need to go out and like actually actively go and do that. I say, like, you know, Google is free. Like, there's so much out there, go and get it. And we've dropped a couple in here, and, you know, I'm open to people reaching out. I'm Verda everywhere on LinkedIn, all of that, to like have this conversation. And I always say to people, you know, ask 3 before me. So have you done 3 things before you got to me to put less labor on me to do that? That was like, I did that ever since I was a teacher, but, you know, like, have you done that? Because there's a lot of things that are out there that you can actually find before you come to each person. But that's number 1. I think number 2 is being an extremely vocal. If you don't identify as a woman or other marginalized genders, are you being extremely vocal in your spaces about your desire to do this? Because we will hear you speaking, even if we don't feel confident and comfortable enough to speak up. Being in rooms where we know that there are other people talking about it, like, that's a huge thing. And I think that a practice that I heard that was really quite interesting was, on campuses, when you do, you know, like when everyone is coming for the, you know, beginning of the year and like, you know, putting their dorm up, just putting tables all over and just asking who games, what games do you play, before they even go in to set up their dorms. You'll be surprised, right? Like, oh, what game are you playing today? Whatever. Just asking that simple question so that they know that it's kind of like, it's something that everyone does, and that we're here for anyone here that's interested in just like pursuing that or learning more about it. Putting yourself in the spaces where you will find the people, as opposed to having the barrier, which, you know, of finding you. So those are just like some real tactical things that I would say. I don't know if these are supposed to be my last words. Yeah, those are the tactical things. I don't know if they're supposed to be my last words. They may not be the best last words, but I'm going to end it there.
They're great.
Wonderful words.
They were great. I think I would just point folks to anykey.org. There's a tab at the top that says resources. There's a bunch of resources there. So if you're running a college club, we have a pretty substantial white paper that not only provides some tips on thinking about inclusion and diversity, but also I think often, you know, those of us who are working on campuses may need language and framing to take up the line to administration. So there's also some framing in there that folks may find useful. If you're running a tournament, we have a white paper on gender inclusive in tournaments, including how you can make your space trans welcoming. So there's a bunch of resources. I would say go to the NEQ resources website. There's an inclusion 101. We created Dr. Johanna Brewer of NEQ. They're the director of research, created a really nice inclusion 101 to just like, here's something you can use in your club or your space to start talking about inclusion. So that would be one thing. If you are running a college club or involved in some community, you're welcome to drop me a line. We have a Discord. We have a bunch of other college club, organizers there. So if you're looking to find folks who are also kind of tackling the things you're tackling, feel free to hit me up and I can plug you into our Discord. So those are just off the top of my head things.
That's fantastic. Well, I can't thank you both and Dr. Grace. Oh my gosh, this has been wonderful. And I saw in the chat, is this a weekly program? I would love that. Right now, I'm just thrilled that this is just a one-off. So we're going to share it as widely as we can. And we're going to encourage everybody who joined us to share our link. And we also want to encourage you to keep the conversation going and join us in Chicago at our conference coming up August 22nd through 24th, where we had a wonderful time last year, and we have a great community here in Chicago that is growing, and the educators, industry, folks who are really moving and shaking, as it were. So please think about joining us. And thank you. More thanks than I can share right now in our last minute to our panelists. And if there isn't another last word you want to say, if you weren't happy with your last words, we still have 2 minutes.
I love that. I just think that it is really about the expansive nature of this. And I think that it's really, this is like kind of the group to me. If people that are engaging in like college and collegiate spaces, it's the opportunity to expand beyond what you can imagine. And in order to do that, you have to have more people around you that are not like you. And so just really really seek to do that in ways that are authentic, and not because you think it will make your program look better, but because you know it'll actually mean that our industry will be better and will actually create a wonderful template for all of those that are going to come behind you. So that's where I would end it.
Fantastic.
I couldn't say it better. I'll let that be it.
Wonderful. Well,
This
many
has been
thanks.
awesome. April, you're amazing.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, April, you are a rock star. Thank you so much. This has been so much fun, and I hope everybody is following you and watching what you're doing and getting inspired by it, because you're really doing some fantastic stuff.
Exactly.
So thank you. It was an honor to be on this.
It was.
Thank you so much. It was an honor to have you both, and I know we're going to move that needle.
Love it. Love it.
Thanks, everybody. Enjoy the rest of
Thanks.
your day.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Fantastic.